here. It's kind of streaky. Okay. Okay, we are good.
All right. Okay, I reconvened the RSSD board meeting at 6:22 p.m. Item number 5, flag salute. Everyone please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, tonight's meeting is being recorded and live streamed via YouTube at the link on the agenda. And in our closed session, I have 2 items to report out. The Board of Trustees reviewed and voted 5-0 to accept 4 confidential settlement agreements to resolve claims against the district instead of proceeding to litigation. Also, in the case of 2021-22-02, the board voted 5-0 to accept the stipulated agreement regarding violation of Ed Code Section 48900C rehabilitation plan. And next item of business, I haven't seen my trustees for a while, and I'm excited to hear about how their summer went. We'll start out with the trustees report. And why don't I start on the far end with trustee Q?
Okay. Well, hope everyone had a relaxing summer. I actually kind of stayed around and didn't go anywhere because my home remodel is delayed and still going. So supply chain issues and inspections. But hope everyone else had a relaxing summer. I wanted to thank Assistant Superintendent Hu for organizing the professional development trip to the Museum of Tolerance. Actually, so it was kind of appropriate. And so thank her as well as all of the staff for taking the time to do the 2-day training and be so intently focused on anti-bias education and inclusion. So the 2 days were very emotional. I think, you know, that's part of the experiential learning was what made an impact on us and provided the why for the importance of this work. But I think everyone came away from that with some initial plans for their school or for the district. And I have great hopes for this coming year. And then it was also great to catch up with other Sandpiper parents at the back to school ice cream social. It was great to see people. We were marveling at how fast the time flew by because now our kindergartners are 5th graders. Wow, where did the time go? And somewhere in there was the pandemic. So that was not the typical experience, but it was great seeing everyone and all the kids having fun and the parents catching up. That's it.
Thank you. Trustee Babali.
Yeah, similarly, it's great to be back. And I think the first day of school was really exciting for everybody. It was nice to see the little young ones getting into the classes and middle schoolers, especially those, you know, moving to a new school was exciting. I've got an 11th and a 9th grader. So the 9th grader was very excited, but a little nervous for high school, but everything went well. So that was good. The one thing I will say that didn't go so well is the traffic. And so I hear the groans in the room. So taking my kids to Carmel in the morning has really been a challenge. I know you all probably face it as well. Just want to say a note. I think the California legislature definitely had good intention in terms of wanting kids to get more sleep, especially those who are in high school and middle school. And my understanding is the rule is no high schools can start before 8:30, no middle schools can start before 8 a.m. The issue is that we don't live in a rural area. We live in a suburban area, which has a lot of schools in one concentrated section. And the traffic, particularly on Ralston, can be quite a bear. So rather than complain about it, I would like to give some a suggestion that if my colleagues agree with, I think this is one of those issues where we can try to take some local control, given the restrictions that we have from the state. But if we could talk with our partner districts in the area and the schools in the area, we've got a 2x2 coming up. This would be a perfect thing to talk about, but not just with Sequoia District, but with the other schools, because we do have a number of them around. To try to figure out if there's a way, and also include Samtrans in the conversation, because that's a very important partner. See if we can, make some headway on this, because I think that it's in the interest of all the students. Losing 45 minutes to an hour when you're coming across town is really not a good use of time. So anyway, that's first thing I want to bring up. Secondly, I had a really extensive conversation with a parent who reached out to me, and I would like to bring this to the board's attention. This parent has children with some learning challenges that are related to dyslexia, but the children do not qualify for an IEP. Nevertheless, these students are in need of supports, and I imagine that there are other families that are in this situation as well. So I would just want to bring awareness to this issue and ask Superintendent DeGuara, invite him if there is any information he could provide at this point in terms of what how the district proceeds in these situations, what kind of support
Yeah, absolutely.
it could offer.
So a couple of things I'll just share is what you shared tonight. I actually had another conversation with a parent this summer about dyslexia and the process by which the families go through to get to the point of diagnosis. And my understanding, dyslexia is underdiagnosed. It often takes a long time to get to that diagnosis. And we are aware of that. The state is aware of that. We've actually just started looking at piloting a tool, FastBridge, which is a universal dyslexia screening that we're looking at to see how we can utilize that assessment for students to identify those learning challenges earlier. Because we know, especially with dyslexia, that if you're able to identify it, you're also able to implement strategies that help students. Actually, Assistant Superintendent and I just learned about actually a dyslexia font, which provides greater access to reading and writing for students. And it's simply a font that you add to a computer, right? So we are looking into those tools. But I would say for any parents who have concerns about dyslexia in particular, please reach out to your school administrators because those are screenings that we're able to do and to support families with. So yes.
Good. Thank you for giving that information. I think that's really helpful, and I would encourage us to widely disseminate that information. So I just have one final thing, which is I'm very excited about this. I'm a bit of a facilities junkie, so this is something that I think is exciting. Next week, Tuesday, 6 to 8 p.m., the Four Corners Working Group is going to be soliciting community input, and this is on the Alameda Corridor project. So those of you who've been following this issue, it's actually been talked about for 10 years. And this is a project, it's called Four Corners because there's 4 jurisdictions: Belmont City, San Carlos City, San Carlos School District, and Sequoia Union High School District. And the area we're talking about is Alameda between Ralston and Cranfield. So that area, as you know, if you drive that, you know that there are 3 4-way stops, which tend to clog up traffic right in front of Carmel High School. So that actually is going to be transformed to have 3 roundabouts instead. And there will be increased sidewalk capacity as well on Alameda. So that's going to do a couple of things. Hopefully ease the traffic congestion, and also, create a safer path. There are tons of kids who are walking, especially during, drop off and pickup times. So it's very exciting that there has been $3.5 million in funding that's finally been allocated for this project. And I'm told that it's actually going to be done by next year. So by the start of the school year, not that there'll be construction for a year, but that there will be community meetings that go on from now until then to get stakeholder input. Project will be finalized, and then the project will actually ensue. The construction and all of that will happen during the summer, so it doesn't disrupt school time. And it should be done by the time, school is ready to be started next school year. So I think that's everybody comes on Tuesday night and gives their input.
Thank you. And on to trustees.
Like my fellow trustees, welcome to families and staff to coming back to school yesterday, and hope everyone had a great summer and relaxing time. Excited that we're all back in school and back in person. And I am very excited that my kids are back in school. As much as I love them, I am glad to have the interruptions constantly. Last week, I was listening to a report on the news about mental health statistics for school-age children in particular. And then it came up later in the week in a conversation with a fellow parent, and they were surprised that mental health issues can happen even in elementary children. And some of the statistics I heard on this show were really, really startling about self-reported children, school-age children reporting suicidal thoughts, etc. And a lot of it is obviously, not surprisingly, stemming from COVID and the lockdowns. At the time, and even more so now, and just so fortunate that our district has the counseling support it has, because in this news report, as they talked to various school districts, that was the resounding ask that parents and staff had, was more mental health support. And I feel so fortunate in our district that we do already have that. And just wanted to give a shout out to the district that I think there are a number of things that we have seen are in need, whether it's something that our staff has been alerting to us or the administration has realized through looking at data. I feel like we moved from a model a couple of years ago where we had mental health professionals who were not full-time staff. They were contracted. We moved to a full-time model. I think that is just absolutely in the best interest of our students. Just want to encourage our school district to continue to think about and innovating and leading on practices that are best for our students. And with that, I'm going to hand it over.
Well, those are hard act to follow. I think I'm going to start by saying thank you. Thank you to all the community members and parents that helped us pass Measure C, and formally Measure C is passed. Thank you to all the families that are coming back to school and joining us in our communities and willing to build those communities back again. Thank you to all our parents for their patience and flexibility as we relearn our routines, getting back into school, because it sometimes does take a lot of patience and flexibility to relearn those routines. And thank you also for your enthusiasm for being parts of our schools. One of the things I'm always curious about is what observations are happening each month. As for instance, like mental health month, that sort of thing. And August is rich with some unusual ones. For instance, it's National Dog Month. And so I love that it's National Dog Month, but please keep your dogs off our fields. It's also Children's Eye Health and Safety Month, so don't poke your eye out. And in addition, it's Family Fun Month, but that reminds me that it's not fun. It's not fun until somebody loses an eye. So I wonder why those two are really put together like that. And then in addition, it's National Catfish Month. So get your excuses ready. See what kind of tricks you can pull on catfishing your friends and tricking them into whatever they want. Apparently. And then it's also National Back to School Month. So welcome back to school and we'll see you this whole year.
And thank you, Trustee Howard.
Two
He's
shows
here
a
all
night,
night,
your name.
right?
It's so much fun. Glad to have such a fine set of people to work with. And also, I'm very thrilled that we're starting out the school year in a sense of calm and normalcy, which we haven't seen in a few years now. I want to wish everyone a very safe year going forward in terms of both health and pandemic, and also any other activities that happen. And along the terms of safety, I just want to give a quick shout out. First of all, to the local police department. I was driving by one of the schools, or a couple of schools, and I noticed that local police were out there keeping an eye on the kids, making sure people are adjusting to the traffic patterns, and really appreciate that attention that they're giving there. And also a shout out to our crossing guards who work all year long, and I saw many of them. And they're out there keeping the kids safe, keeping the traffic in line, and appreciate everything they do. One of the biggest fears I have is one of our students getting hit by a car, and I appreciate them doing that. It's in rain or sun or whatever else, they do a great job. And finally, I want to welcome back all of our previous students, and also welcome to our new students, families, staff, and anyone in the district, and just wish them a very productive and safe school year. And with that, I will turn it over to the superintendent.
All right. I just want to say what an awesome start to the school year. This was my first start that I could actually legally see kids' faces and parents' faces smile, right? Masks are, of course, strongly recommended indoors, but outdoors, there's a little bit more freedom than there has been in the past. And I could see students smiling, parents smiling. I could hear the laughter at our schools. It was really a smooth start across the district. I visited all 7 schools on the first day, and from an instructional lens, it's like we never left. From an excitement lens, people were just all there and all in. It was really nice to see. I want to piggyback on Rahila's comments about mental health. We are fortunate as a passage of Measure C, our school force education foundation, which is in the middle of their ECC campaign. A little plug there. It's all of these folks coming together to support our students in ways that are not possible in other districts. One of those pieces is robust mental health, right? So we are fortunate to have that sense of community, and that really was shining these first couple days of school, and it will continue throughout the year. A couple logistical things I'll share. We have 3,849 students that have attended schools thus far. More and more every day for the next couple of weeks as people return from out of town and all those good pieces. Last year, we were right around the same at 3,860 at the end of the year. So we're right on par. We have more TKs this year. We have 88 TKs, and that was part with the changing birth rates. We had 69 last year. So what we would have expected based on those extensions. This year, we started our Universal Meals program. I just want to give hats off to Ruby. We're right there. Where'd she go? To Ruby and Allison, who have really been working really hard to make sure all the T's and I's are dotted, and as many things as they can control are aligned. And I think we've had a successful start to the breakfast and lunch programs. And I just want to thank the Central and Ralston staffs who went through all the ins and outs and the little nuances and just the challenge of piloting, right? To fine tune it so that it could be successful at the start. A little information about universal meals, because I think there's some misinformation out there. We often call them free meals for breakfast and lunch because technically, our families do not pay for breakfast and lunch service. That said, there is some cost to them, right? So education code put into place a requirement that all schools serve 2 meals free of charge. We're actually not allowed to charge for breakfast or lunch service. The state reimbursement rates are $2 roughly, give or take a few little programs that are coming into play, $2.11 for breakfast and $3.93 for lunch. We're doing a great job of making sure that our lunch costs are covered. The part that is not covered is really the people power to support that breakfast service this year. So that is a new piece in the cost for the district. But all in all, the idea of all kids coming together, consuming nutritious food, starting the day with full bellies. Research shows that if my belly's full, I'm going to be more apt to learn and pay attention, and all that good things happen. So all in all, it is a good thing for everybody. And we're working up towards fully implemented. Yeah.
Quick question for you. With the breakfast, there were a couple of different models of either bringing the breakfast to the students or the students picking up. What?
The students are ordering in advance, and then they are picking up and eating in classrooms. So that's how we're starting the instructional day. A couple of the pieces, I should have mentioned this with the enrollment. A couple of things that we're looking at. So with the start of school, we're enrolling students. We're seeing who's moved. We're learning where space is available. Our district practice is when families enroll to place them at one of their 2 closest schools. If that's not possible, we keep them on a list and we try and make that match whenever we're able. So we're still working with some families on finalizing those placements. We have a process called intra-district transfer, where you might, for whatever reason, choose to want to go to another school. We try and support that to the greatest extent possible. Again, not always. We know that some families are still hoping, fingers crossed. We'll, again, continue to work with families throughout. Traffic, I'll piggyback on that too. We're also as busy. I was doing a little traffic directing with Officer Abinator, first day of school. It's a bit crazy out there. So, parents were just reminding them to be safe, slow down. We'll get into those habits as time goes by. One thing that we did learn, I will say, and when we're looking at school placements this year, usually it's coming up Ralston. We actually had families that are up here this year that are attending school in either Nesbitt or Sandpiper. So we've historically in the past worked with Samtrans to build the routes coming up. We need to work a little bit harder to build those routes going the opposite way. Those times weren't perfected. And I will say that I learned that they're actually not official routes going back down there. So I've been reached out to Samtrans. I don't know that there's an imminent solution, but it is in our radar that we need to be thinking about that. And then finally, COVID updates. I'm going to send out a community COVID update tomorrow with a few little pieces. We don't need long presentations on it again this year, knock on wood. Our COVID safety plan is online. We will continue to track district cases. This year, we are only going to notify families if their child was a close contact, in close proximity to an individual. What we found last year is we were sending out so many notifications that oftentimes they were going ignored. So if families get a notification, it should be a signal to them to monitor for symptoms, to test if symptoms arise, and just be ready, test. And the district does have plenty of antigen tests in stock at this point in time. We anticipate that we'll be able to continue to provide families tests to test at home as needed. That's the state's new strategy, is really getting out tests when they're needed, pushing tests at home. The testing, pool testing, in-school testing really did push on school district staff across the state. So I think they're responding with, we have tests. Right? So we'll still have the capacity to do tests here at school, but we'll be encouraging more of that at home tests and giving the tests with. And I think that is it for me.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Conference report. Item number 9 is speakers wishing to address the board. Public has the right to address the board on any agenda item or non-agenda item within the jurisdiction of the board. To do so, please submit a speaker card to Ms. Ellinger, noting the agenda item if applicable. Non-agenda items, comments we will hear after my speech here. And agenda-related comments we will hear during the items discussion later in the agenda. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If addressing the board on non-agenda items, please be aware that the provisions of the Brown Act prohibit the board from acting or discussing such matters at this meeting, including responding. Ms. Ellinger, do we have any requests for comment on non-agenda items?
Yes, we have Shrey here to discuss transportation and mapping.
Please, the podium is yours.
All right. Thanks for having me and thanks for having this open forum. So the main issues I wanted to bring up were actually ones that Superintendent DeGuara actually already mentioned, which I appreciate. We've been talking over the summer. And so the situation for my family is that we were in the boat that he was referring to, and kind of actually ironically brings up the point that Trustee Bhopal brought up, which is the transportation issue and the traffic. So we live up the hill here, about a block from Fox, block and a half from Fox. Due to a number of reasons, we're only coming to the district this year for both my son, who's starting first grade at Fox, and my daughter, who's starting at Ralston as a sixth grader. And because we were coming to the district for the sixth grader, I guess the mapping for the middle schools is not based on the location algorithm like the grade schools was. So we got mapped to Nesbitt, as did some of the other folks that we learned throughout, trying to figure out how to get our kids down there in this area. So all along Hallmark, there's a number of middle schoolers that are mapped to Nesbitt. And so all of those folks, including ourselves, are kind of in a jam trying to get our kids all the way down there during rush hour. And then for my family, it was getting our kids down there during rush hour and then getting our son back to Fox to make his school. So I'm an emergency physician. We have 2-parent household, luckily. I'm an emergency physician, however, which I know actually, I know Sunil, and you know a little bit of the struggles of our schedules. And so unfortunately for us, we are somewhat a 1-parent household many times of the day, either because I'm coming home late at night and would like to sleep more than like 3 hours, or I'm going to work at 5 or 6 in the morning, which I did today, for instance. So I'm not able to help with either pickups or drop-offs on a regular basis, which again makes it very challenging to get the kids down and up. So I think the 2 issues I want to speak to very related was one, the transport issue. I think if the district is going to do a mapping program for middle schoolers that is not based on distance, I think the district is obligated to provide transportation for those kids. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. We had school buses year round, even if you live close by, because they can't have kids trudging at 20 degrees with windbird, even if it's like only half a mile. But when I moved out to California 20 years ago and found out there was no school buses, I was just shocked. Like, how do kids get to school? We're a green state, but we're having all these parents drive everywhere. And I know it sounds like the Belmont community has not been super excited about paying for school buses. And maybe they're not necessary for the bulk of people. But I think either using a third-party service, like there's various ones now that provide services to schools. I think like Kids Zoom. There's a couple others that I found, Hop Skip Drive, Kids Jet, Ride Zoom, that do contract with districts. I think doing something to get parents down there, because we're not always going to be accommodating or able to accommodate the closest school. I recognize that there's capacity issues, but I think we're obligated to at least get kids there, especially parents who are less fortunate, don't have the bandwidth to get them there themselves. Those are my comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments. Okay, do we have any other speakers?
No other speakers.
Okay, great. We'll move on to item number 10, the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Are there any modifications?
Yes, a couple of amendments. One in the consent agenda of instructional minutes. Central was one of our pilot breakfast schools. They've continued to mess with their schedule just a little bit. In the grades 3 and K in the attachment, the recess has been adjusted, just shifted. It was 10 to 10:15. Now it's 10:30 to 10:45 to align. Long story short, instructional minutes are the same, just a shift in the recess time. The second change to the agenda is the removal of item 13, which was the CSEA job descriptions. We have a bit more additional work. They're not ready for approval yet. So we will re-agendize when they're ready.
Any other modifications to the agenda or consent agenda?
I move for approval of the agenda and consent agenda as amended.
Second. All those in favor?
I
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. On to one of our longstanding topics that's been going on, and this is going to be the most pleasant time. I'm gonna and invite Joy to come tell us about the parcel tax. Thank you for joining us today.
So, good evening, Mr. President, trustees. It's a pleasure to be back with you, Superintendent. So tonight I wanted to share with you a post-election analysis. So a couple things that I think it's important to keep in mind as we go through this. I do have with me the data from Major K as well, so I can make some comparisons there. And I'll speak through the slides and add some color commentary as we go. But you know, some things we are relying on two different systems as we look at the data. We're relying on the statement of the vote, which is provided from the county. And it provides just raw numbers, right? Who voted, how many in each precinct, yes or no in that precinct. So we get that data. And then we have PDI, which the campaign used throughout their system. And they are a voter database here in California. And that's how we were able to, you know, understand different trends in voting, you know, whether it was through yes IDs or some of the other numbers we go through. The two can't look at each other other than the statement of the vote, you know, tells us who voted, but it will never know how people voted. We don't know who voted yes or no. And so there are comparisons we just can't make. So feel free to ask questions. And if it's just one of those times where I can't get that deep, I'll let you know. But with that, I'll go ahead and get started. And I think, will the clicker work? Are you good?
Okay, just let me know.
Okay. So the first slide here is just the election results versus the polling results. Sometimes it's nice to go back and take a look. And the first bullet I put here is, you know, sometimes it's really easy to just jump into the data without really taking a step back and being appreciative of the thoughtful plan that the district has been working on for well over 5 years now. And that was to be able to find a way to increase Measure R to help deal with expanding growth in the district, more students coming in, and being able to maintain that high quality of education that the district provides. And so Measure C was combining and renewing R and K. But in order to do that, the district had to go through a process of passing Measure K as well. So each step was just part of this really big long-term process that many of you have been at this table for during that entire time, or involved in all of these different steps, Measure R, Measure K, and now Measure C. So when we went to do the polling, could we do something that would help keep up with the growing costs, even though the parcel tax remains flat? And so one solution that, you know, we talked about and really worked on was, could we add
What we could enroll, I think he's gonna show.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Not everybody tells us that they're really gonna stay. So she was theoretically.
Here's what I'm seeing online.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Not everybody tells us that they're really.
Yes.
Okay, apologize for the brief interruption with technical difficulties, but I will reconvene after recess. And we'll continue off with our good news about the parcel tax.
Thank you again. Next slide, please. So this slide really takes a look at not only Measure C's final results, but the final results of Measure K and Measure R as well. Some initial takeaways. First of all, we do see that there is a continued increase in the number of people, registered voters, who are participating in local elections. San Mateo County was one of the first counties to start doing mail ballot elections. That's been in place since 2018. So the increase is, actually pretty insignificant between 18 and 22, but you notice the difference between 2013 and 2018, how participation increased there. Measure C passed at the highest percentage rate at 75.5%, 10 years, with that 2% COLA. The other thing that I think is just notable is a reminder that Measure R was actually Measure K was actually it was an additional parcel tax. So oftentimes we do see that renewals come in at a higher rate. That is pretty standard. So although Measure C exceeded its polling results, it was still within the margin of error with your polling. So I just throw that out there because The margin of error numbers, you have always tracked very closely to all of your polling. You have always been very close to that margin of error. So sometimes there has been a little wiggle room up or down, but it's always been within the margin of error. So great results, but still within the margin of error. Next slide, please. So this is the overall turnout. I like this because I don't often come so close between expected turnout and actual turnout. So I feel like, you know, there was a 0.26% there that we were off by, but we were aiming for a little higher. I thought a couple more people would vote. So I'm very disappointed in those two people. But you can see we have 26,120 registered voters within the district. We had expected 12,422, 12,351 actually voted in the election. There was a very small drop off between people who voted at the top of the ballot and people who went down. We do, 500 people, that's pretty typical. We see anywhere from 5 to 10% as being very typical for the type of drop off. So next slide, please. So turnout of supporters and supportive groups. The good news here is there's lots of good news. You can see that we had identified this round 1,207 new IDs. Those were people that we had not, through all the various campaigns in the district, been able to ID as a positive yes supporter. So that was really great to have that energy. Those supporters, so anybody that you talked to on the phone, that you talked to at the door, that we reached, person to person, they turned out at 81.2%, which is pretty remarkable. And you can see that carries down to the undecideds as well, 74.7%. I mean, it's just the power of individual conversations. Some of those undecideds could have actually voted yes, right? I don't know. I only know how they were ID'd in our system again. So here's where the data doesn't necessarily match reality. But what it does show is the power of conversations with people in your community and how much that gets them to vote. Because remember, actual turnout was below 50%. People we talked to voted at a much higher percentage. Previous yes IDs, we did a lot of communication with them, especially around texting. So they also were well above the turnout of others. So it's a little bit interesting, the math of percentage of turnout versus percentage of turnout of others. So we're not looking at percentage of turnout overall. What we're doing is we're isolating the turnout of our voters and subtracting them from the total turnout and then saying, how well did everyone else then turn out? So it's not the same as the entire group. It's the group except for the group that we're isolating to take a look at. A little magic math there. So the difference is the difference between the turnouts of the two numbers. The GOTV target, that is our yes voters, our previous yes voters, our parents. Those were people that we targeted in particular because we knew that they were very passionate about the cause and very supportive. And you can see that number goes up to 65.8%. Some of that is, just due to the big number of parents. So you can kind of see down below the parents, 3,104, 2,020 turned out to vote for a participation rate among parents at 65.1. Again, well above the actual turnout. And in fact, well above previous measures turnout for support. So this is the first time you had broke 2,000 parents voting in an election. So I look back at the data on that. So great news that we had so many parents participating. I know sometimes it feels like 65 is a small number, but I can tell you it's actually very strong parent participation.
Can I just ask you a question about this? This is a really interesting part.
Yes.
In the sense that is it that we can conclude that we convinced way more undecided people than we convinced our parents? Or am I interpreting that incorrectly?
Yes. It's that, we probably spoke to, because an unidentified voter is someone actually spoke to. And they were able to get that person to say yes, no, or undecided. So we recorded a result based on an actual conversation. Parents, though, is where we take a look at all the parents in the district, and we may not have actually spoke. I mean, we certainly sent them mail, we certainly texted them. But if someone had a one-on-one conversation with them, and especially towards the end of the campaign, we were really trying to target and increase parent participation. And some of our volunteers were very active in using their PTA networks to try to increase that participation. But emails and, text blasts, it's very different than that one-on-one conversation. And so you see that in the numbers. If we had called all 3,104 parents, probably that number would be higher. If we could actually, have one-on-one conversations. I don't mean sit down and have a phone bank. I mean, have personal conversations with them.
That's a really good insight. I think that taking that data and extrapolating what the message is from that's really interesting. The other thing I was going to ask about the yes previous IDs. So that means, are those folks who have previously voted because perhaps they were parents and now their children have aged out of the district, they were previously yes, some subset of that, and then they are now still supportive of parcel taxes for the district? Does that make sense?
It does. Previous yes might in the past have just meant someone that we had identified in a previous election for your school district. Previous yes tends to now mean that it is someone who was supportive of a ballot measure here in your district in the past. So there have been so many ballot measures done over the years, and obviously we maintain a large database of those yes IDs. And so that means when we come back, we can load in all those yes IDs and say, at some point, these people said, yes, they would vote for a ballot measure. So they may not all be previous parents, but it's possible many of them are. It's also possible many of them were seniors living in the community who someone had spoken to and gotten a yes ID from.
That's helpful. So I guess the message to extrapolate from that is we are doing a good job as a district in reaching those folks who may not still be on a day-to-day basis connecting with the district because they're a parent or
right.
But we're keeping in touch with those folks.
Yes. Yeah, they continue to stay supportive well above the average, or at least turn out and vote. A 75% win means that you had to have won across almost every demographic. Again, it's very hard to pull together data that can show that, perfectly, but right, you have to have support of Democrats and Republicans and independents and seniors and young people. You'll see in a moment, seniors still are the highest voting category, but other voters still matter too. Yes.
Joy, are the different rows, are they mutually exclusive? So if someone spoke to a parent and they said, yes, I will vote for Measure C, are they in both yes ID and parent or just in parent?
So they are not mutually exclusive because each parent someone could have spoken to them. So again, the yeses and the undecideds are someone we had an actual conversation with. And so they're not separated that way. They could be duplicative data.
Yep. I was assuming that, but I just wanted to.
Yeah. Of course, we could go through and I could say how many parents were yeses and how many of them voted. I assume the number would be pretty high. It's just the data gets really granular. So. All right. So summary of voter contact. I think this is, again, a really interesting number. You have to think about this two different ways. Our senior phone bank, we had a universe, so that's how many people we were hoping to reach, of 2,754 voters. It was a very specific target. You can see that those seniors turned out in high numbers. Their turnout was 72.9%. So very, very high. We may not have reached everybody in that voting universe, but they continue to vote in high numbers, which is why we continue to try to reach out to them and help them understand the benefits of the parcel tax, including a potential senior exemption. Precinct walks, our universe was 9,818. I think I have here. We actually knocked on 2,551 of those doors. So again, the universe bigger, but we did actually get to a percentage of those. Many people may have even left behind some materials. You can see again, over 58% of those people voted. So we were targeting a specific population because we thought they would be likely to vote. And then outreach circle and texting. Texting was when we were loading in mostly our, lots of data. We were texting out to all the likely voters in some cases, and then separately to likely supporters. I think this number is, low at 51% because again, I think texting is an easy tool and it's a way to reach a lot of people, but I don't think it actually gets people to turn out and vote. And we just see that time and time again with the data. It doesn't make it an unworthwhile venture. It just means that a personal conversation is going to go farther than a text message. Turnout and support by geography. So here we broke it down by some of the different areas. One of the things that I thought was really remarkable was your unincorporated area, where you can see there are 123 registered voters. They have always been above 95%. They are a very supportive group. They don't, not all of them turn out, only about 40% of them, but it's a group that really loves the district. So they are always near the top. The rest of these cities they actually track very closely to where they had before. So we're seeing similar percentages and turnouts. Obviously, support is higher this time, being in the 70s, whereas last time we were mostly in the 60s, except for, again, the unincorporated area, which was higher than everybody else. But same as before, San Carlos hanging out at the bottom, probably because they have a San Carlos school district and they just don't understand that they're part of your district. It's not that they're unsupportive, but there are very few number of voters there. San Mateo County, or San Mateo, not the county. San Mateo, again, 74%. So really strong support. That's up from 63% in Measure K. They were about similarly situated there. And then Belmont making up the majority of your voters, and also one of the highest percentages at 76.2. They were 69.1 for Measure K. And then Redwood Shores 72.9. Redwood Shores was 65.3% for Measure K. So they haven't really, although they were more supportive this time, the lineup pretty much stayed the same. So both in terms of turnout overall, how many people participated in the election, and the overall support in each community was about this similarly.
When you say San Mateo, that's the Lori Meadows name.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes. I don't actually, I'd have to see the map. It is. Yeah.
The side of the bridge here.
No, but the ones that have voted on election. So they don't vote on election. Lori Meadows.
All right, so next slide is turnout by party type. Yes. So Democrats, Republicans, and other, and again, you can see you have a Democratic advantage. There are more Democrats than there are Republicans or others. Others is just everything else. A good portion of them are just declined to state voters, but you also have Peace and Freedom, Green. I don't know, the Eagle, there's a couple others. You don't even know, Natural,
American Independent.
American Independent, yeah. So we just tend to group them all together in other because the two major parties are usually the ones that we see the most active involvement in. So, you know, Democrats make up 53% of your registered voters. 53% of them actually turned out in this election. And so they made up 59, so almost 60% of all your ballots cast in this election. And they also happen to be most supportive in the polling, so that does help us. Republicans made up about 16% of ballots, and everybody else made up about 26% of ballots. But again, in order to get 75%, you have to assume you had cross-party support.
Are those numbers of ballots cast or they actually voted on their measure?
That is of ballots cast.
Okay.
So. The next slide is turnout by age. So I shaded that 55 and above area because you can see that makes up, you know, over 50% of your voters, which it always has. That it is people who probably, you know, have aged out of your district. Their children and their families are probably not in your district that are making choices about your district. And so it's just a reminder, again, you clearly had their support, but it's a reminder that they're an important constituency. I know we're always thinking about our parents as a school district, but you have a community of support that is built on people who are not parents. And that's important to keep in mind. So field and visibility, I mean, hats off to a really strong, thoughtful, engaged group of parents who participated and community members who participated in the campaign. Over 1,200 new yes IDs were identified. 500 signs, seems higher than I thought, but a lot of lawn signs out. I don't think it was 500. I think that's a typo. 5 rounds of ID and GOTV texting. So again, 5 rounds of texting, 50% of them voted. So texting. 2 GOTV mailers, they went to over 6,000 households. We did see an uptick in people turning in their ballots late, but people voted throughout. So it was really important that we have early communication. There were 3 persuasive mailers, 1 senior mailer that was targeted directly to seniors and spoke to them about the senior exemption. We did 3 robocalls with some very cute students who and young people. They weren't all small children. And then we also did some Facebook ad impressions, and you can see it was 141,000. And it equaled 3.5 million plus for over 10 years for the district. So the last slide is just some basic conclusions. Pretty much all of this is things I have already said. The district has been thoughtful. Thank you for your trust in our firm as we've helped you through this process over the years. It has been an incredible pleasure to see this come to fruition and to be a part of this process. You have amazing families and just such a thoughtful group of people who are leading the helm here. And I think that shows up in these results. We were effectively able to target voters across many different means. Turnout amongst parents was the highest it had ever been in the past. I think that was great. Again, contact's key. We just see where we have face-to-face conversations, it makes a difference. And the GOTV efforts also made a difference. We did see an increase in some of those key voting demographics as we got closer to election day. So.
Do we have any questions?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say it was really a pleasure to work with you and the whole team. Dira was also great and you were terrific and very engaged, both of you, and really helped to lead us through the process. And it was just really, it was a lot of hard work, but it was a pleasure to work with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And if any of you haven't heard, Dira started Stanford Law School.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I am so awesome. So happy for him. Incredibly heartbroken that he is really no longer to work with him. But yes.
Well, I just want, oh, go ahead.
I actually did have a question because I was wondering, because it seemed like Redwood Shores had a lower turnout than some of the other areas. And I'm just wondering if slide 10, that outreach summary, can be broken down by voter demographic? Because I'm curious if the outreach was lower in Redwood Shores in terms of that touch point with in person, and that might have led to it. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Well, I will say two things that I've looked into just looking back at the data. So historically, turnout has always been lower in Redwood Shores for every district. So I don't know if it's, just voters who are not feeling engaged in that community. I did see a high number of seniors, but that doesn't always make sense with, because seniors tend to be really engaged in elections. But they've always been below 50% in your previous elections. So they've always been some of the lower turnout. I can certainly look and see, back but I did look at how the campaign reached out to that area. And I will say there was a lot of walking done in Redwood Shores. It appeared that there had been a lot of walking in that particular area. So it doesn't seem to me that there was less voter contact there. And they are a part of our overall mail. But if I will say this, if you're not likely to vote in the election, in order to be thoughtful about our campaign resources, we target likely voters. So, right, what you're going to see is voters we targeted probably showed up, but voters who just never show up, which it happens to be nearly 50% of Redwood Shores, we didn't talk to. And that's because they never show up. And so we just didn't put more resources there. So I can break it down, but that is, I did look into it, and that is what.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and trying to dig into the whys, right?
Yes, yeah. It is interesting, but again, I thought it was interesting how much outreach was done in the area. Again, focused on likely voters. So likely voters got a touch and they voted, but there's just 50% of voters we don't talk to because they just don't vote.
Joy, do you think that it all relates to the visibility issue? Because we're doing touch points, but there's a lot of homeowners associations that won't allow display of signs, for instance, so it decreases the visibility just a little bit.
Yeah, it could be that, right? But at 7,300 registered voters, I mean, it could be a lot of homeowners associations, no signs, but we only had 500 people drop off. And I can't tell where that drop off happens, right? Again, that's where the statement of the vote and our voted data doesn't really, it just tells me people voted. It doesn't tell me whether you voted on Measure C. So that's why, going back to your other question, where was this on us or a percentage of the ballots? The only way I can see is by the ballots. I only know the drop off because the statement of the vote has that drop off. So.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure interacting with.
Yeah, I think many thanks for hearing it. Trustee Howard, card and do a few thank yous myself. First off, thank you for you and your team, Dira, also for coming out. It's, I first was working with you on Measure K and now it's Measure C. So I hope I never have to do this again. It was a pleasure.
You're not going anywhere, you're not moving, so you'll have to do it again. Some contacts in 10 years.
And while we're on the topic, I also want to thank Gopal and Jacqueline, our co-chairs.
Yes.
Vote yes on Measure C committee. They did a lot of work along with all the other volunteers, through our district and community for getting the word out, text messaging, knocking on doors, talking to people, yard signs. And also I want to thank the PTAs and school force for providing the funds to do all the signs and all the advertising and everything. So we didn't have to bug our community to donate to that. So that was a really big boost up to get the campaign going on first. And finally, thanks to the 8,881 community members who believe in funding our schools to provide excellent programs to our students and took the time to exercise their civic duty and vote. Thank you.
You're here.
Thank you, guys. Have a good
Thank you.
evening.
You too.
Okay, we will move on to item number 14.
12 first.
I'm sorry.
12 and then.
Item number 12, yes, head service update.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah.
All right.
Want me to slideshow it?
If you could slideshow, that would be great. Thank you. All right, so today is going to be a pretty brief synopsis, given that yesterday was the first day of school. We'll save some of the achievement data for later down the road. I wanted to talk to you entirely about the various summer programs that we offered this year, just to give a wrap up of what happened. Even though we had a shortened summer, we were still able to fill it with opportunities and options for our students. So we had extended school year, which is offered to our students with IEPs, who not all students with IEPs, but a population of our students with IEPs. And it is stipulated by how long it takes for students to recoup their learning loss. We also hosted a YMCA Power Scholars Academy. This was our ELOP grant money for our students who were eligible. And then we ran a summer music intensive for kiddos going into middle school, so they could really just continue their instrumental work before coming into 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. So I'm going to start with ESY. Lara and her team wrapped this up before Lara wrapped up her time with us as Director of Special Programs. Katie Marsh is a teacher at Nesbitt, and she was our ESY principal this year. It's always great to be able to give that leadership opportunity to our own staff, kind of growing your own. We served 43 students in the kind of full day traditional SDC classes, as it looks like, kids coming, one teacher to a number of kiddos. And then we also had 12 students who came just for services, whether that be counseling or OT or speech. So we ended up serving 55 students over the summer in the variety of ways. We had offered spaces to all 76 students who qualified. I know there were some questions about who didn't come, why didn't they come? It's a kind of a mixed bag. A lot of it was because families had finally planned vacations after a couple of years, and they were leaving and taking time off. So that was part of the numbers, but it's still a pretty good turnout. We did have 40 staff members from within our district who worked this summer. ESY is 4 weeks long for 3.5 hours every day. So 9 teachers, 26 paras. We had 4 high school volunteers supporting classrooms, and our ESY principal all put in 20 days of work to support our kiddos. 19 days because July 4th was off. We did also have occupational therapy, speech services, physical therapy, adaptive PE, behavior support, and a mental health therapist available to our students to continue the services throughout the summer for our students who with the greatest level of need. For YMCA Power Scholars Academy, we went back and forth, and I shared a lot of information about this. We had hoped and hoped and hoped we'd be able to offer this great program. We were able to secure funding for quite a few students, but in the end, the staffing challenges proved to be almost insurmountable. We had three mixed grade classrooms with shared team teaching, where we had teachers teach the first half or the second half, and they partnered together. It was
impossible to get more staff. And so we were not able to offer to more than those that we did invite. We, as a reminder, this was offered to our ELOC eligible students. So anybody leaving grades K through 6 at the end of the 2021-2022 school year, who is either an English learner, a foster youth, or homeless youth, or participated in free and reduced lunch, were invited. We sent out 204 invitations, and we had 44 students who participated consistently in the program. It did run for 34 days. Our minimum requirement was a 30-day program to be ELOC compliant. Because of July 4th and timing, we ended up going 34 days rather than ending on a random Monday, which is very strange for families. We heard from many who were interested that the 7 weeks was too long. They didn't want to participate for the whole time. Part of our requirement was, we're happy to offer this, but we do need you to commit to the whole time because we're paying for you for the whole time. I think the length of it was tricky for families. I think there were, same thing, lots of families who had finally planned vacations and others who just wanted a break from school. So we're hoping to learn from this summer. We've got some data. We've got preliminary data that I can share with you, but I have a meeting with the YMCA staff in a week and a half, and we'll go over in more depth the information that they have. But just to show you, for our students in grades 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, we have data. They did collect data for K1. K1 was the hardest. We had 2 teachers teaching that. One teacher got sick at the beginning. One teacher missed a week in the end because of miscommunication and fingerprinting. And so they really had 3 people covering over 7 weeks. So they didn't give me the data just yet. It was a little bit hairy as well, just getting consistency. But if you'll look, what I put up here is the math average grade equivalent growth. Okay, so 0.7 is growing by 0.7 of a year. So in 7 weeks, their pre and post data showed that the 3rd and 4th graders grew almost an entire year's equivalent in 7 weeks. In grades 5 and 6, there's same thing. 0.4 is 4/10 of a year of growth in 7 weeks. Pretty impressive for the amount of time they had with them. The next column is their percentile ranking. So as you can see, the percentage for the average percentile ranking went up by 10 percentile points in grades 3 to 4. So if the average, and I'm sorry, I don't actually remember what the average was, but if the average was scoring in the 50th percentile at the end of summer school, they were scoring in the 60th percentile. Huge gains in 3-4. In grades 5-6, it was a 1 percentile gain. For ELA, you can see the same similar pieces. There's less growth. It's a little bit slower with reading comprehension. That's something that takes time and repetition, more so than discrete skills like in mathematics. But even so, in the course of 7 weeks of half days, they made 1/10 of a year growth on their reading assessment in grades 3 and 4, and 4/10 of a school year's worth of growth in their reading. Soren.
So is there a development? I assume there is. Developmentally, you can see quite a significant difference between grade 5, grade 6 in terms of ELA development and progress. Would you attribute that just to developmentally, or was there some other factor that could explain that?
I think looking at where some of the kids started in grades 5 and 6, we had a little bit more diverse group in 5-6. You had some higher readers to start with. I think the kids were a little bit closer and some more similar in level in grades 3-4. So I think the large grade equivalent growth in ELA is probably attributed to some of the higher performers in the class.
That's interesting. And then just going back, you don't have to go back to the slide, but I had a question about what percentage did you say of kids who were coming consistently?
We had 44%, 44 students participated consistently, 50 students were enrolled.
Oh, so that's pretty high.
Yeah,
okay,
fairly high.
That's good.
I mean, there was, the YMCA worked with county health. There was quite a significant number of COVID cases in the program. So lots of kids missed 5 to 10 days simply because they were quarantining and siblings got sick. And so that was definitely something that, 2.5 weeks in, they started implementing weekly testing. County health came out and did it for them. YMCA followed the protocols and we were in touch, but their director and I talked every week, but it was their program, so we were letting them run it and let them do all the notifications.
And still the numbers are high with this.
Yeah, I mean, the kids did well. I mean, that's, kids coming, that's also our teachers teaching and working really hard.
I forgot, did the students only participate in math or English, or did
They
they
got both.
all of it?
Yes.
And when they were selected, it was based on whether they were one
We
of,
used their reading scores to select them.
okay,
We used a number of things. Number one was that they were ELOP eligible. And then we invited anybody who was then below grade level in reading and ELOP eligible. And we sent it out to everybody. In the end, we sent it to every single person who was ELOP eligible. We did have a few kids, very few, who were, I think we had 2 participants who came in the mornings because they were eligible academically, but they were not ELOP eligible.
got it.
But they were selected for their reading, not their math needs. But they got this benefit. And this is 4 days of academics for 3 hours a day, because every Friday was a field trip day. So they did things like go to Grand America. They went to the Jelly Belly factory up in Fairfield. They got to do lots of fun stuff. So it was still summer camp for the kids and not drill and kill learn all day long.
Yep.
And then we also offered a summer music program. This year, we expanded it a little. Last year, we only did woodwinds outside. This year, we were able to do strings and woodwinds. So we had Alexis Veras de Valdez, who is our 4-5 choral music teacher who has a strings background, and she also does the sandpiper and Nesbitt strings. And then we had Luke Barnes, who is our 4-5 instrumental band teacher, who has had experience in the past being a middle school band director. And then Peter Thielen from Ralston. The 3 of them teamed up together. We invited every single child in 5th grade, exiting 5th grade, and every single child in 6th and 7th who had already participated in instrumental. So hundreds of kids were sent, and it was an open invite to whomever was interested. We ended up having 24 kids participate in band and 18 kids participate in strings. They were able to break into groups, have sectionals, and do ensemble playing, which is a nice treat to the ears. I had Jessica, this happened to overlap with my vacation. So I had Jessica there doing attendance every day and helping with the dismissal, the kind of coming and going. And she would report to me about how much better they got from the beginning to the end. How she couldn't tell what they were playing in week 1, but by the end, they were truly doing ensembles. And this was only 3 weeks, again, 4 days of the week. Kids were on campus for 2 hours. They either came for a sectional and then ensemble, or ensemble and then sectional, so that we could keep a 3-hour day for our teachers and our coaches. It's a fun activity. I think one of the questions is always, why don't more people do it? We had, of those students there, we did have a handful who joined in week 2 or left early. We tried to be accommodating of their summer schedule because we just wanted a fun experience. Most people really were just, thank you, no thanks. But the ones who did participate were really happy to have a second year. We had a number of students who participated last summer come back again this summer for additional instrumental support. And this is just a way to have some sort of enrichment. We know that it's, everything's been tricky in COVID, and we want to make sure, even as we change our programs at elementary, and they were able to have a full program this past year, but the year before they didn't. We wanted to just make sure we gave everybody a nice boost before they went into middle school. And like I said, it was open to anybody who was participating in Sandpiper or Nesbitt's music program, as well as the middle school. So not just Ralston kids, but all of our entering 6th, 7th, and 8th grade musicians. That's our summer. What questions can I answer for you?
Did you have a question? Go ahead.
Can we go back to the slide about the increase of that one right there?
Yep.
So how does that compare to prior years?
Hard to say.
Prior year to compare to? And is this reflective of the cohort or the program?
Hard to say because this is year 1. They use the STAR reading program and the STAR math, which is an assessment tool that we do not use in our district. It is used in districts from Renaissance Learning. So this is a different metric than we have. So I don't have any intelligent conversation to have with you about how does this compare to our data. This was purely a pre and post of the students that were in this group. I think if we were to do this program again, we'd be able, they consistently use the STAR reading assessment. We'd be able to see what the value add is. And is this cohort that had a great growth? Is it that these kids came in so low that it was easy to make good growth? Is it that the upper graders came in a little higher and so it was harder to show growth? I don't know. This is part of what we're going to look at when I meet with the YMCA in a week or two. I can't remember when my appointment is, but we are going to then break down the individual students and look at the data and debrief the program with them.
So if we don't have anything to compare to, because it's the first time we've done this program, but we do have this cohort of kids to follow longitudinally, and also how they were doing at the beginning of school year last year, when assessments are done versus this year.
We could certainly pull these kiddos into a custom report, and I can do some analysis and share that with you in a board report. So we could look more specifically at just kind of the trajectory of these students.
Because even if we're just avoiding a summer slide for these kids,
Yep.
that's a huge win.
Yep. And, part of something that I think is important is particularly as you get older into grades 5 and 6 and 7, so often you don't get any fun in your school day because you have lost your elective for a directed studies class or for an extra study hall of some sort or a structured academic classroom. I think this is so great because the program the YMCA provided included a field trip every single Friday, plus every afternoon was fun sports and games and community building. So there was a summer camp aspect along with the academics. So even if we wanted to compare against last year's academic program, 1, the students were different. 2, we used a different metric. 3, there were so few students who participated last year because of a whole bunch of different factors that I don't know that it would be statistically relevant to make good programmatic decisions. Good information for the individual to track the child, but I'm not sure how it would help us on a programmatic level.
Last year, there was no after school, right?
There was no after school. Last year was a 3.5-hour program as well. And we used the Lucy Calkins summer school program to align with our reading and writing program. But same thing, we had classrooms of 6 kids in some cases and classrooms of 20 in other cases. Sorry.
Did you finish that in a minute? So it feels like from the data, clearly this made a difference positively in both math and ELA. And obviously also in the music instruction. So from a fiscal perspective, so all that being said, definitely good investment for those reasons. From a fiscal perspective, do you feel like this, the investment, given the amount of students, could there be more economies of scale if we were to have more students participating?
I think that's a hard one to answer, given that we had so few students participate this year. Our original bill was quoted at 150 kids. So coming in under 60, of course, we had an adjustment of the MOU, which is at a higher rate, right? So I think it's $2,600 per student for 7 weeks. It's a lot of money, but it made a difference for these kids. So, I think from a global perspective, I think we would definitely need to recruit earlier. Hope teachers are less burnt out this next summer, because 7 weeks is a long time to teach. Especially when your summer has been cut short by a week after a year of pandemic teaching. But without staff, we can't invite 150 kids.
So I agree.
So it's a little, right, like if we could do it at 150 kids, I think it'd be fully worth the money.
Agreed. And so my point is not that it's not a good program. My point is, can we find ways to expand this so that we can help more students? And so I was just going to say that you alluded to the fact that, people had summer vacations and the like. And I know that there were some reasons why we couldn't plan earlier.
Yep.
But if we know that this is a good program, can we try to get the word out earlier? And then that way people plan their vacations to not be gone
That's
during that time.
something that as we debrief and look at the rest of the K-1 data, there's some anecdotal data too, and some qualitative information that I'll get from our providers when we meet. I think we certainly can, knowing what our budget is going to be now, knowing what we have and what we can offer. It was a tricky thing last year, given that the requirement came out in January. But it's definitely something that if we plan now and give staff ample time, we have a higher chance of hiring and hiring from outside of our district too, right? Like, it's not necessarily only BRSSD teachers who can teach our students during the summer. It was just the global teacher shortage is truly global. All of the YMCA's programs were very understaffed, and across the Bay Area, they were having a hard time hiring, which means if you don't have adults, you can't invite all the kids that you want to invite. Certainly something we can, once we look at the budget and Rudy gives me the yay or nay on how much it costs and how much we have and how much we're spending on the ELOC program for the 180 days of school that just launched yesterday, we'll be able to make some better decisions.
It sounded like one of the barriers was folks needing to take a break. And so not only is that understandable, but how do we make that predictable for them? Meaning, if we were going to have a summer program like this in the future, and we expect that that's to be the case, how do we get at least the calendar out to potentially eligible students and their families so that they know how to plan their vacations around the program? And are we able to schedule our program such that the breaks might make sense? You know, like, who the heck didn't want to take off the January or July 4th week this year? You know, that's sort of,
Yeah.
so, you know, that's a potential barrier that could have some solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, it all comes down to, we now know what the guidelines are. We now know that this is ongoing money, and now it is something that we can plan for going forward, and not something that, oh no, we have 4 months to put something together.
Yeah.
And be audit ready.
Thanks for the presentation and fantastic numbers here. It's impressive. And I'm curious, of the, I was listening to the comment here and it slipped my mind what I was going to say. Oh, I know what it was. So I'm sure, you know, it's just day 2 of school.
Yes.
I mean, we don't know where these kids are going to be by the end of school. At what point along, I mean, we have to assess them throughout the year. At what point do we know that there's certain children that could benefit from this program?
I think the January assessment data, which was the data point that we used as our primary source this year, is the appropriate time.
Okay. So
The
that gives
fall data is too early, right? It's like having that your child's at risk for retention conversation in September. I'm sorry, we've only been here for a month. I think the January mid-year data is always the most useful. It's highly predictive at that point. I think we have gotten to a place where we are definitely getting better data, but if you'll remember back to the spring, it was we don't have data from January. We don't have data from January. Please enter your data. This is how we're selecting students. March, okay, I'll take either January or March. And then even down to June, there were teachers sending me emails about their students to whom I would say, where's your data? We ended up enrolling kids because we know those kids need to be in, but really we can identify folks faster and give better communication if we as a system work better to follow deadlines. And that's partially why we're, you know, this isn't today's agenda, but that's partially why we do have a pilot reading assessment coming out. That we can use to streamline our universal dyslexia screener. We do have some options that we've been working through looking at, and we just don't have anything good that's universal, that is fast and effective and efficient. Hence the pilot. But then there's that second piece of, if we can get effective, efficient data, and it's not taking hours and hours of teachers' time, then maybe we can get the January information more quickly and more expeditiously.
Yeah, I would encourage continuing this and
It's just-
identifying the students, recruiting the teachers, whether it's from our district or others. Yeah, and I think it's great, you know, closing that gap between the kids who are struggling and not, and then it's a better experience for everyone in the classroom if they're ready.
Yep.
Hit the school in August. So thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question. So for the ELOC funding, are you required to have a 7-week program?
We're required to provide 30 days of programming that's 9 hours long during non-instructional days. So that could in theory be a 5-day program during ski week, a 5-day program during spring break, and then a 20-day program in June.
Okay, so it's actually for the full year.
It's 180 days of school plus 30 non-instructional days. It's logistically tricky so this is something that we'll continue to plan for coming up as we think about what are our options, who are our potential providers, because we do have 2 weeks at December, 1 week in February, 1 week in April. So if we could do a little bit then and then do a shorter summer program, that might be.
One of the things you mentioned, and that was echoed at least one or not two of our brown bag meetings, was that the data, receipt of the data on student achievement is one of the barriers to how quickly we can identify potential children that are available. And so I might imagine that there are some folks that just need a reminder, oh yeah, I need to get it done. It's one of those million things on my list. But there are other folks that actually need some space to get it done. And is it possible when you're seeing an educator that is been reminded once, twice, and is still having trouble getting that data in, that they may have some additional challenges that may prevent them from being able to move forward on that easily?
We do already have tiered supports for our adults in terms of helping them get assessments done based off, there are a number of things, right? Like there's a timeline. We don't test every student at every testing opportunity. We test every student 3 times a year. In between, the opportunities are for the kids who didn't make it. We do have SRI at certain levels to make it faster. We do have our reading specialists who coach to help calibrate at the beginning of the year, but also they assess the kids that are on their reading, on their caseload. So in any given classroom, there are a handful of students that the teacher is not testing regularly. And then beyond that, there's coaching support, but it is part of, I think most instances, it's not that the staff hasn't done the assessment, it's that they haven't shared their data. So it's a practice of inputting the data, not getting them to do this. So that's a smaller battle, which is a good thing. But that's part of why we really have to find a way to help them be more efficient and effective, right? Like the mantra I live by, which I know some people don't like to hear, is working smarter, not harder. People work darn hard. We don't need people working 12 hours a day. I want to help them be more strategic in what they do spend their time on. Hence a reading pilot, which we could talk about at the next update. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great discussion.
I think I'm done. No more for me tonight.
Okay. Now on to item number 14.
Okay.
Okay. I am very happy to be in front of you tonight, presenting you with the TAs between BRSFA and BRSSD. For the language, the non-financial portions of the CBA. Our teams continue to work throughout the year collaboratively and openly through the IBB method. It continued to be a great experience, and we hope that momentum continues moving forward on smaller items that may come up throughout the year. With that, it is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve the tentative agreement between BRSFA and BRSSD.
Open up for questions.
So I will add
Oh,
just
go
real
ahead,
quick,
please.
earlier in the year, our agreement was the financial side. This is language side and clarifications that came out through the IBB. So there's no cost financial implications in any of the language. It's simply a process.
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the tentative agreement between BRSFA and BRSSD.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, item number 15, LCAP.
I'll speak to that one. So this board approved our LCAP in the spring. There was a new table in the LCAP this year for calculating something called a carryover. Long story short, the descriptions of that was slightly confusing. So I had calculated it slightly wrong. Worked with the county SMCOE over the summer just to make sure that the correct numbers were reflected based off of the latest understanding. And they've signed off on all the numbers based off of our actuals. So this is just a non-substantive update. So none of our planned actions or our goals or any of that has changed, just the contributing tables and the corresponding calculations from there.
And I will add, there was countywide confusion on that as well. So Rui has graciously accepted that, but it was confusion globally.
After a couple hundred pages, you can't expect to be perfect. So.
I move that the Board of Trustees graciously accept and approve the LCAP modifications.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passing unanimously. Our next item is a discussion topic about our BRSSD SUHSD 2x2 agenda.
Yes, our first 2x2 meeting with Sequoia is coming up. It's scheduled for September 6th, which is actually before our next board meeting. We always solicit topics to add to the agenda. We come together and co-collaborate with the agenda with Superintendent Williams, and we'll just select topics.
And articulation is an important piece, right? And in fact, I think that when we say articulation, having a discussion about not just basic subject preparation, but how our electives are correlating with options that are available to kids at the high school level.
I'd add on to that in terms of our middle school programs, thinking through what are the career pathways that are available at Carlmont and Sequoia high schools, and trying to see if there can be some coordination on that. I also had a couple more things. They have a goal 6 on data sharing. And I know that we share data in terms of getting, a report from the principal at the end of the year, but it would be great if we could talk about a more ongoing data sharing to promote articulation. And then I was going to say also the traffic issue.
Yeah.
And dealing with the scheduling, perhaps in terms of time staggering. And then also the Alameda project.
Another potential topic is the evolution of our K-8 focus and how that might fit into the Sequoia Union High School District specialized programs as well.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, there's an
what
IB program at
Yeah.
Sequoia, and there's potentially going to be, as we all, I think we know at this point, an IB program at Nesbitt soon. And one would hope that those kids could coordinate their matriculation as they see fit, if they've already been part of that thinking, as well as design thinking. Now, the Sandpiper program can then extend into the Sequoia Union High School District, but programs might, or colleges might fit that line of education well.
Thank you.
So I wanted to add student and staff mental health and well-being and recovery from the pandemic. I think there's an opportunity to talk about, the current state and strategies and kind of share information across the two districts. And then also academic readiness and success and kind of the impact from the pandemic, because now we've got, ninth graders that came in, well, their eighth grade was all distance learning. So was there an impact on their academic readiness, and how did that actually work out in that freshman year? It would be good to know. And because we've got more kids coming through, right, that were impacted by the distance learning. And are we filling in the gaps appropriately so that there's a smooth transition? And then the last thing I was curious about was just maybe more discussion on the different math pathways, because I know that there's a new AP statistics course being rolled out, and just kind of how that works with the middle school math pathways and how that syncs up to the high school math pathways.
It's going to be a full meeting.
I was in the topics.
Some subset of.
And we can plant a few seeds and maybe work a few things in different venues. Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other comments or no? Well, thank you for the two of you for taking your time and representing the board in this. We'll look forward to hearing your report out from that. Okay, next item is number 17, the CSB board policies, the June update. This is the first reading, so there's no action yet. But it's time to discuss.
Lots of new policy updates or amendments. We are using a new CSBA tool. They continue to evolve their tools. We're hopeful that you're able to see the track changes a little bit better. Still, maybe not optimal, but better. Staff do go through all the policies and make adjustments as needed. For the most part, we're doing our best to stick with CSBA policy, recommended policy, because that helps us stay current and up to date. I will notice that we have already identified, thank you, President Leinbach, on policy AR 3553. There was a call for specific titles and identification of people who have access to do a certain thing. If we still had a blank line, so we'll be filling that in for the second read. Any feedback between now and next adoption is great by the board or anybody from the community. And if there's any other feedback or discussion now, happy to take notes.
Well, I just noticed on policy 3551, it was struck out that the board cannot purchase lunches from schools anymore.
Or cannot.
No, I can't purchase lunches.
Staff, I think.
From where?
Because we can't sell lunch.
Because
Yeah.
yes. There is a share table, actually.
Leftover milk and vegetables.
Oh, Chucky darn.
Oh, I did have a question on the track changes. I wasn't exactly sure. Are any changes that the district makes, is that in a different color than what CSBA's changed, or is it kind of all mixed?
That's where it becomes a little bit. I'm going to defer to, yes, please.
So it's a 3-tiered process. So you have what the policy is, and then you have the CSBA recommended changes. And that was a separate document that I provided in the agenda. And then the third one is assuming all those adoptions have happened and are accepted, then our cabinet goes through and they put in where you saw the red highlight. That was the cabinet's additional feedback or comments.
Okay.
So it is kind of a phase. So I wanted to give you each step of the process as we started this the first time, just to see how it would work.
Okay.
I found that hugely helpful because like we see all CSBA changes in one doc, we see all district changes in the other, because before they were over, it's like which is which. So
Yeah.
very clear now. I like it a lot. So very helpful.
Clear as mud. Great. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any more comments? No? Okay, well, we'll bring this back for action at the next board meeting. And speaking about the next board meeting, item number 18 is future board meeting agendas.
Yes, so we have the first two listed. We transitioned from meetings every 3 weeks to meetings the third Thursday of every month. So on this one, we just have the August 29th, which is our retreat that is scheduled at San Mateo County Office of Education. Possible closed session, still not sure if that'll be needed or not. But the two items are strategic planning district goals. On the consent agenda, we approved a contract with Living Strategy. I'm so impressed with the work that Living Strategy has done for strategic planning in other districts. I think they bring to a nice process and facilitation that drive us and move us forward, but also allow staff to participate. The other thing that I appreciate from a process perspective is their goal is to bring in as many stakeholders as we can. So as you guys probably saw in that, many community forums, focus groups, all kinds of different outreach, really to get us to the place that we need. A strategic plan that has large overarching goals, but specific action items that will take place every year so that we're better positioned the following year. They'll be doing some work to help build out the graduate profile idea and likely tomorrow in the board update, you'll see some of that mapping that we're looking. But their project is divided into a few distinct phases with specific deliverables. And we'd like to use that strategic plan session for the board retreat to really dig in as a board, to look at where we've been, get a third lens on where we've been, and start tracking forward from the governance perspective. So that's a big portion, but happy to add anything else as the board would like to suggest. And then the September meeting, we'll have some more back to school updates after the first month. We'll be bringing a strategic plan update. They'll be visiting with us to talk community and globally, publicly, how we'll go about that. Unaudited actuals, the business side, Jerome will be giving us a tech update. And then we believe the dashboard local indicators will be ready for approval at that point. So really interested in other retreat items that the board may have.
Well, I guess I had one that probably more of a retreat item now that I think about it. And that was just a general discussion of kind of our approach to celebrating different communities during the school year. So the level of board involvement, like sometimes when it's a special month, like Black History Month or Women's History Month, you know, we might individually mention something, but and different schools might be doing something, but maybe some general discussion on our approach to that. Like, is it going to be kind of more district led? Hey, we're going to pick these things to focus on, and then, you know, the board's issuing resolutions, and, you know, we're communicating the different things that schools are doing. Because right now it's very grassroots and kind of haphazard. So maybe that might be an interesting thing to discuss at the board retreat.
Okay.
Yeah, I think our last retreat, great working session with the Post-its and little stars and everything. And we came to a lot, I think, you know, take that work that we did, fine tune it, but I think that's part of what the living.
Great. And I will say that
Usually we overload the retreat, so it'll be good. Feasible.
I knew that we curtail all the agendas. Hey, good. I will say we've already started planning that. There will be elements that we sew up the things that we've done and move us forward. So Gilbert and Lana, who you'll meet with Living Strategy, are very cognizant of not doing duplicative work. right? That we're taking what we've done, because we've done some really solid stuff.
Mhm.
How do we bring that together, sew it up as we go forward?
Okay. I think that's it
Yeah.
for board meeting, and that will close the open session.
Wait, how about for the September 15th meeting? I was gonna,
Oh, go ahead.
because I was just listing like board retreat. So I was thinking for the September 15th, I know we got this letter from the Stonewall Democratic Club. Actually, there's a copy of it here. But it was just to have, their request was to agendize a topic for discussion at a future board meeting. Doesn't have to be September, but it's really diving deeper into our policies and practices and initiatives that support LGBTQ plus youth. So I think that is a worthwhile. I know in visiting the different schools, we've talked to the clubs at Ralston and things like that, but just to kind of have a comprehensive view of what's happening across our district and what we're doing. And they also brought up that there's an LGBTQ plus history month in October. So that kind of led to my other thought process of maybe we should look at all of these celebratory months as a kind of holistic thing. But just wanted to bring that up if we want to include something like that in a future board meeting.
I would like to have that discussion as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if we have the time for it on the September 15th or maybe the October, either one.
Certainly, we can agendize it. The other thing that I might suggest is that I do kind of a comprehensive overview and do some outreach, because there are elements that are unique to certain schools. It probably would be most appropriate for me to do outreach with their schools, get some feedback, provide that in a board report, in a board memo, and then go from there to decide if we want to agendize that or if that update is sufficient. For example, I know Ralston, I think, is doing Unity Days coming up, but there's lots of different elements I think that we want to coordinate together first.
I'd also suggest coordinating with PTA Council and getting their input as well, because each site does have some unique, attributes, right, given their population. And so yes, it can be grassroots and somewhat haphazard, but that there is a beauty to that too, in that people, that's what their population and their community, it makes sense for them. So I think it's both sides of it.
I will say I am pleased to know that we do celebrate LGBTQ youth and advocacy. I know that our sites are very sensitive to supporting our students and our staff and ensuring that everybody feels part of the community. And I can say I know that is not the case in a lot of schools and a lot of school districts. So I'm pleased with what I've seen. That said, of course, there's always room to grow. Okay.
Superintendent DeGora.
Yeah.
Can you do the outreach to the principals? I think we mostly focused on celebrations and support that's acknowledgement of support. Can we also include, or just maybe an open-ended question about other ways that we're supporting this community? One thing that came to mind is I remember several years ago, we changed some of the bathrooms at Ralston. And so things like facility updates are not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind, but those are very important kinds of supports. I only remember that because it got mentioned, it came up to the board. I don't know if any other schools do that. So that would be a area of interest to understand.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, along the same lines also, like counseling and mental health.
Yeah.
And bullying, so not just the positive support structures, but also what are some of the tough areas that we need to work on.
Great. I will go ahead and use this memo kind of as a guide for information gathering. I'll reach out to our school sites. I'll provide that to the board as one of my weekly updates, and we can agendize as appropriate from there.
Great, thank you for taking that on.
Sorry, one other thing. I was just thinking about the fact that we used to have pre-pandemic, we met with students. We actually met on site, and it feels like this particular issue, LGBTQ, it feels like that's something that if students would want to have their voice heard to the board,
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense that we not just be talking to adults, but talk to students as well. So in general, I would say talking with students is a good idea, but particularly on this.
Yeah, I probably wasn't ready to share this, but I will. What I'm kind of looking at, I should have finalized it by now, but I haven't. So I have process of brown bags with staff. I'm feeling ambitious that I want to do brown bags with kids just before brown bags with staff. So we're increasing that dialogue. So that might be a great venue to do that. Great.
And so we're not, just to be clear, we're not saying that we're agendizing for September 15th, but that we are working on this process so that we have time to sort out the issues and then agendize at some point this year.
Correct.
Great. Any other items for the
I guess
upcoming
one
agendas?
thing I also had was just questions about COVID safety protocols for board meetings and larger indoor events on campus. So I don't know, maybe it's just some kind of safety protocol update discussion and kind of our current practices and thoughts as things kind of reopen more. Because I know outside it's, I mean, everything is, mask strongly recommended, but just understanding like what the current practice is across the school district and, are we going to change our advice over time or that kind of thing?
So we need to agendize that, or
I don't know.
can that be something that's a communication out to the
That's in,
public?
that's in your up.
Yeah, so I think that is in our COVID response plan that's on the district. But I think also as a board, we've been aligned with CDPH and using CDPH with very, very few exceptions, maybe one or two exceptions. When adults come on campus and in masses, we say, hey, wear your mask so we can keep kids in. But for the most part, everything is CDP aligned. I can do that in an update or in the future.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure if it was a board agenda topic,
Yeah.
more of a weekly update kind of thing.
I can make sure we do a
Like
weekly update.
where we're at in terms of different practices.
Okay.
There's the strongly recommended and then there's the actuals, like what's really happening. So I'm just.
I can just say, I would probably say from my first day visits, I'm looking at my team, I'm gonna say 50-50 ish. Yeah,
50-50 in terms of math
Masks.
usage.
yeah,
Students or staff?
ish, yeah. Yeah,
Kids of all ages?
kids of all ages.
So I would say, I found Principal Adler's summary of the changes. It was very long, but I was surprised how many changes were in there. So like, you touched on many of them earlier. You talked about like antigen testing versus PCR testing. The mask is highly recommended, et cetera. I don't know if that has been in one of your updates. If so, I apologize if I missed it. I was catching up on all of Principal Adler's communications, and that was in a recent one.
In my community update tomorrow, I do touch on a few of these.
Great.
Oh, okay.
So I'll make sure that we are a little stronger. Sounds good.
Any other topics? Okay, in this case, I'm going to, we need to convene a closed session, and there's nothing that the board expects to report out of the closed session. So I will convene the closed at this point at 8:25 PM.
Right.